And as soon as I hit that button, we're right away live on Facebook. So it's always a pleasure to have everyone joining from different areas here through Zoom and Facebook Live. Pretty soon, things will be back in person for the Novi Public Library. And actually, many things are, but we're going to keep some of our programs virtual because it works quite well. We can reach a number of people from everywhere. So thank you for joining us this evening. My pleasure to introduce our program. It's Cultural Conversations and Connection. This will be about similarities, differences, and acceptance. We will, of course, talk a little bit about race and different perspectives in terms of cultural and ethnic differences that we all have. We have a full panel here. I like it. My pleasure to introduce some Novi residents, some people that represent various organizations that also serve the Novi community and the metro area at large, professionals, doctors, some of it all, to hear different perspectives. I think this is the first time that I can recall hosting a program where we have people from different ethnic backgrounds, and I think that's important, so we can pull it all together and see what we have in common. Some things we may not have in common, and that's okay. We have Sunitha Grandhi, a Novi resident. We have Conchina, Dr. Conchina. Did I say that correct? Yay, I practiced. Bruce Turner. We have Linda Schleicher, Dan Moen, Kristen Kennard, who is almost doctor. Can I call you almost doctor?
Yeah,
And
days.
yeah, just a few more days. And Raju Vermandaberry. Was I good?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, look
Namaste.
this is going to be a good evening. I got it, huh? Love it. And I'm Gail Anderson, Programming Coordinator, and we're here to talk about racial issues once again. And I think we wanted to start off talking about cultural family values, because that's something that we all have, no matter where we are in life, ethnically. We have values that are important to us. So I think we're going to start off talking about values, and the values encourage aspirations and hopeful thinking, things like that. So who wants to start with that area? I'll jump in at once if you want. Sunitha, let's start with you, because we've talked about
Certainly.
this off camera. So let's talk.
Sure. When we think about cultural connections and conversations, automatically the first thing that does come into our view is really, what do we stand for? And in this regard, the first thing that always comes to my mind is, how are we raised back home, and how has that helped us to quote unquote fit in as we come to the land of the plenty, the land of America, right? So some of the things that comes to my mind, at least as far as family values, is really the respect that we have for, starting with the elders in the community, the elders who shape our thinking, our vision, some of those things. Another thing that is sort of unique to, well, I won't say necessarily unique to India, but I think necessarily unique to pretty much every tradition, is also a respect for teachers and respect for your environment. So many of these things is what I think sort of shapes up our personalities and everything. And speaking of elders, I know that for us, for me particularly, growing up back home, growing up in a joint family system, where my dad being the oldest and having all my dad's brothers, we all kind of grew up together. And there was always that respect for, what my dad would be, his vision for the whole family, and how, how everyone just looked up to the older people in the families. So some of these things is what I look up to, and I will, hand over the baton to others on how you see as how the family values really kick in, and that shapes up who we are and how, how we fit in this country.
Good start, Sunitha. Who else wants to follow that? I
Yeah.
also want to mention, I'm sorry, people who are watching on Facebook, if you'd like to participate, please type your comments in the comment section. I am watching there, and I will address any question or comment that you make in that section. I'm sorry, go on, please.
Yeah, so this is Linda Schleicher from API Vote Michigan, and I've been on your program before, Gail, and I have also mentioned to your the individuals that have listened that I grew up in Detroit. I was raised in Detroit. I was born in Detroit. And it's really funny because I see a duality in the sense that one, when I'm outside playing with my friends, we all play and we all talk alike, we all played alike, we like the same kinds of sports and the same kind of, when we were preteens, who we liked as movie stars and things like that. But inside the home, it was really very different. I think because some of the things that I grew up with were my mom's traditions. And so some of those were very similar to my friends, but some were different. And I'll give you one example. Everybody, you listen to your mother, there was a lot of respect. Respect was very, very important. Being too loud or too aggressive was considered very inappropriate. And the other thing that I found was, and I learned this word because we all want to take care of our parents, and as we move towards getting older, we think about our parents and the responsibility. But what I found was there's a word called filial piety, and that I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I do now, and I kind of understand it, where a lot of parents, depending on what cultural group they come from, the expectation is that their children will take care of them. So that means as they get older into their older years, there's an expectation that the children will do the right thing because their parents sacrificed for them. And so now it's your turn. However, as I've, like I said, born and raised and grew up in Midwest, there's a lot of different feelings about that. Some people feel like, hey, I got to live my best life. Yet my parents live theirs. They've moved on. Were they like 30, 40 years ago, where my mom comes from, there were no nursing homes. But here they had nursing homes. And I remember my mother saying, there's no way that they would ever put anyone in a nursing home. Well, and when I grew up, I would run up and down the street with the kids. And if you remember, there might be an old grandfather or old grandmother sitting on the front porch. She probably lived with her granddaughter and her daughter, or whoever. And that, for me, I see a big change, because when I got older, I saw that some people just couldn't take care of their parents. I myself had to put an aunt into a facility, and that was really hurtful, and that kind of changed my perspective as well, because that was just something that was totally against what I grew up with and what we thought. But reality is that sometimes we have to do and make those hard choices. And so for me, it's respect, the feeling that you have to take care of, or you're responsible for the parents as you grow older. So those kind of things in the house. And really, like I said, for me, those are the two things that come to my mind.
Mm-hmm. Take someone else to hear what they have to say.
I can go on next.
What was that? Sure.
Hello, everyone. I'm Raju Brahmandaburi. I have been an Indian American from past 20 years. I came from India in pursuit of my higher education. Coming from a family of teachers, my mother was my first teacher, and she always taught me two things. Atiti Devo Bhava, meaning you have to treat guests like a god. Second thing, Acharya Devo Bhava, meaning you have to treat teacher like a god. These are the family values I always inherit and try to apply while I was growing up. And those two things have been very instrumental in bringing up myself as well as my family, because I always believe in teachers and then guests are two important people that you have to treat like God. That's the reason you might find an answer why Indian American weddings have a lot of people as guests, because we really want to treat them and be part of our occasion and get the blessings from them. So respecting teachers and respecting elders as well as your teachers are very important in order to sustain your culture and tradition.
Interesting. Okay. Bruce, was that you who
Yes,
say something next?
Yes, Bruce Turner. I'm a Novi resident, freelance photographer, if that matters.
Sure. You need any photography work done, contact Bruce Turner.
Yes, please do.
There you go.
So growing up, my I just remember vividly my mom's side of the family. And we were born and raised Seventh-day Adventist. So we go to church on Saturday. So one of the things that we did a lot as a family, an extended family, was get together on Friday evenings. And I remember being in those conversations where basically everyone was free to talk. Everyone's opinion was valued. And I think what I learned from that was that community is important, and not just community, but the idea that truth matters. What you say should be what you mean. So I grew up with that. That was one of the cultural things that I took from my family growing up. And I think that has helped me as a Black man in this country, to see, I guess, kind of see through the fluff sometimes, to value people who tell the truth, to value a person's opinion, but still that opinion should be based in truth. And that was really an important thing. It was a humbling thing for me as well, because my family, sometimes you have to tell the truth about yourself. And that was important for me to learn. The idea that you need an inward look to see who you are, who you really are, not who you maybe show everyone, but who you really are and what your real truth is. So I just wanted to throw that out. That was some of the cultural things that I grew up with.
I'm so thrilled to hear that from you, Bruce, because I see so many families on a daily basis through my work, and what really strikes me is how many commonalities we have, and what you said about truth and the community is so much part of the Indian culture. Even though it's multi-generational, there is no way you can do something in the community without your neighbors knowing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone is into your business. Sometimes privacy is an issue, but on the other hand, decisions that are made as a group, not an individual, which was striking when I moved to this country, because as far as medical information or certain information is concerned, the privacy is so valued, whereas in India, it's such a joint effort.
Mm-hmm.
So that is striking that you share that, because the truth, there's a very basic teaching in our philosophy of life is to always speak the truth and speak your own truth, like you said. And I think that's one of our philosophies, is finding our truth, basically. And I'm so glad that it's one of the common things that binds us.
Like that. Anyone else want to say anything on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. It's not on the screen now, but I was thinking about what you just said as it related to just the idea of how in your country, in India, where there's this openness to sharing and the exchange of information, where I think here, again, in the US, you're right, there's this really individualistic idea, like my information belongs to me, it's mine, and I think unfortunately, that has trickled down into all of society. When I think about my upbringing, born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, had a wonderful experience, through school and, playing outside with friends and family gatherings and things like that, that I would think would have been what I would call traditional. Don't experience that as much with my family. There's distance now between a lot of us, meaning, in terms of where we live in the US or outside of this country. But also, again, I think some families, unfortunately, for those who have maybe migrated to this country, the experience is going to be much different than those of us who have been here and didn't carry traditions with us, or our traditions were taken from us. And especially when you look at the Black community, tradition has been what we've made it, or what we've been told it's going to be. And so there's a lot that we experience that may be similar, like you may have certain holidays, or even as I think someone mentioned being Seventh-day Adventist, if you're Seventh-day Adventist, Christian faith. There's just so much there as it relates to how we frame our traditions. So it may not be necessarily framed around our culture. It might be framed around our spiritual experiences or the friend groups we have. There are a number of things that play into that. But I kind of, the question that's raised for me in all of this is, as we look at society today, you know, when you think about being raised in a tradition, who or what is raising our children today? It's a lot different than what some of us experienced growing up. I remember community and knowing your neighbors next door. For our children, often, and even not just children, but 20, 30-year-old people, social media is defining that for us and raising us in a way. And that's just one example of what is the norm, what's tradition, what we should hold close to ourselves in terms of our belief and what is truth. And so how we get to, you know, have this conversation, I think we have to engage in addressing all of those issues and how they are impacting the overall cultural conversation about who we are and what we stand for in this country.
Like that. Everyone's great statements there. Anyone else before we move to another? I want to tie that in, but we've been talking about, I hear a lot of respect. We all have that in common. Truth matters. I really like that. Family, unity, spirituality, all of it encompasses what we all feel. I think that's the connection piece of it. My question is, living in this country, we expect that we are allowed to embrace our cultural beliefs, ethically, whatever it is, we expect that. Do we live out our cultural values in this country, or is it being compromised in any way? And if so, how?
Gail, repeat that last part for me. I'm just curious.
We talked about the things that we value in terms of our culture: respect, truth, family unity, spirituality, etc. There are a lot of things that encompass what we hold truth in our lives. Is America allowing us to manifest what we believe and what we hold as value in our homes? Or are there hindrances? Is it being compromised by one way or another? I'm segueing this into an extended conversation, but I want to start there.
So,
is that a little clearer?
Yeah, I would say yes. There are I think someone spoke of it earlier. You know, when you come to this country, there's a lot of there's a lot of individuality that becomes a part of you know, what you do, whether it's how much you get paid or you know, getting your degree, or it becomes very individualistic, as opposed to what I felt like I grew up with which was a community. Everyone just wasn't just out for self, or at least that's how I felt. Maybe they were, but I wasn't raised that way, so that everything was just about me. I still had a responsibility to my brothers and sisters, or to my aunts, or to my mom, that I still feel today. But I do believe in a lot of respects, the American culture kind of forces you to look at things more individualistic. So yes, I think things are in conflict as far as that's concerned.
I think that conflict occurs only in a lot of different cases. But what I was thinking of, as far as from the legal aspect, like say, for instance, you come from a country that might not have how they treat maybe women. So if you come from a country that does not respect the rights of women and feel individually that you have the right to treat your children as chattel or your wife as chattel, that could be a problem here in America. Okay, so because there's a legal system that's out there that says we have these confines. My mother happens to be Buddhist. So if a person is a very strong zealot who happens to be from another faith, they may be very resentful because they don't understand what Buddhism or maybe what Seventh-day Adventist or what Muslims, whatever religion you are, but people come here so that they can exercise some people come here, not all, but they come here for certain liberties. So when they get those liberties, oftentimes if they become extreme, then that does become a problem for all of our society. So in that respect, it can be a hindrance, but it also is the very thing that a lot of people come here for. I don't know if that makes sense. It's the balance that we have to have in people who come here who want to exercise their freedom because they weren't able to exercise it somewhere else. Sometimes then want to put those same restraints on people who don't necessarily believe the same things they believe.
Yeah,
Linda,
this
I
is
heard you. Sure, Raj, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Raju. To answer your question, Gail, yes, America has certainly given us freedom and liberty to celebrate our cultures, traditions. For example, back in 2005, when I first came to Detroit, I clearly see the need for connecting all the Indian Americans who are originally from the region where I am from back in India. And then that is when along with other like-minded people, we started this Indian American community called Detroit Telangana Community, whose main objective is to propagate and preserve Telangana's culture and traditions. And since then, we have expanded the membership to 10,000 people, and we have been organizing so many events where we celebrate our culture, traditions, and heritage. Why? Why we need to do that? Because first generation Indian Americans, we are fully aware of our culture and traditions and heritage, but not necessarily our second generation. For example, my own kids doesn't know our culture, heritage, and traditions. That is the reason we have been conducting these various events. That way they know their origin. Why they have to know the origin? First of all, you have to understand who are originally you are before you are expanding to others. That's the reason we have been conducting these various events. That way our kids know what we are. At the same time, we let ourselves open to know other people know about culture and tradition. That way we can have diverse environment. We all coexist in this world to make a world as a better living place.
I want to jump in right there because he said something that was really interesting. He said that they want you to know their culture. You want your children to know your culture as you move forward. But this is where I find that in America, we have this concern and issue. There are people here that were denied their culture. They were denied, they not even trying to assimilate, but they just wanted to keep certain people, right, in a peg because it was economically feasible for the government, whatever individuals that were out there. So what you're saying is the very thing that others have been denied, not only from 80 years, 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 400 years, even indigenous people that were here, there was they wanted to wipe out what the people, their life, who they were, okay, sort of say, putting them into foster care, eliminating them, coming here and then taking families and separating them once they have children. And so the very thing that you're saying is the very thing that all people want, right? And some have been denied. So the struggle today is you already have that part, but there are people that are fighting for that. And so this is why I think we all have some commonality here. We all want to have the very thing that you're talking about. And we also want to be respected. Just like you said, your children by 4th and 5th generation, they may not know what you know. They may not even realize the struggle that how you got here, right? And so there are children out there today that don't know the struggle that their parents and their great grandparents and prior to 1964, they think the civil rights is something that's history. It is, they're living it. People are trying to live that today and still trying to get those rights. So, and as we talk about it, it makes people very uncomfortable. So how, I think that there was a concern or issue that, oh, if we talk about it, then people will be offended. And some people will be offended, right? But it is not about, and because we are talking about traditions and about different cultures. And some people's cultures are, oh, that's so exciting and I want to go visit it. Others are like, I don't want to know about that. That shouldn't even be here. That's inappropriate. So who gets to tell us as Americans, all of us, what is appropriate and whose culture is acceptable and whose culture is not acceptable? It is that shouldn't be an issue. Culture and who we are. If, like I said, oftentimes I talk to people who are from the Asian community and they will automatically tell me, I've got 35 years here. I've got 40 years here. Try 400. Try 300. And then, you can kind of feel that, okay, well, maybe if you can open up your mind to that, then maybe you can open up your mind to, wait a minute, there are some disparities here that we need to address. So
what you're talking about is, I think is likely glossed over in this country a lot. I don't think, and sometimes I don't think we talk about it in the way that we should. What you're talking about when people do not have their culture, are stripped of their culture violently. We don't talk about the violence that happened to them and the violence that continually happens to certain cultures in this country. I think it's, like I said, I think it's glossed over. What you're also talking about is a compassion for people's struggle that may not be yours. And again, I feel like, to me, that sounds communal. That sounds like something we all should want. That's not an individual thing. That's a communal thing. All communities should be built up. All communities should be restored. And in this country, we just don't talk about the violence that has been done to communities like mine and others, because I think it does make people uncomfortable. Because in my mind, people don't want to not just feel uncomfortable, but have to take on the responsibility for what happened on their watch.
Who can comment on that? I like that.
Well, I think what Bruce is speaking to a bit is cultural humility. And so where we've often heard that term cultural competency, I'm in the mental health field. And so we figure we take a class and we read about what a few cultures have experienced. And then now we know something, and we often realize once you get out here in the real world, we know nothing. And so to have cultural humility is to be sensitive and to want to become aware about the experiences of others. I think it is absolutely wonderful that Raj and his family and his, could create community around traditions and culture coming from another country, because I understand the world that we live in, and there is this prevailing, they seem to be the majority, that think that when you come to America, we don't care where you're coming from. You should assimilate. You take on our cultures, our traditions, because you're in our country now. And so, but then there's that other side where I think I've heard it twice now, where it's that thought that when you come to America, that you gain a freedom to be who you are.
Is that true?
Do I think it's true? I think it's true if you believe it's true. But what we see in reality is that there's still a prevailing mindset that there is what is right. And we see this now just in light of the pandemic. There is truth. If it's your truth, then it's the truth. But our experiences are so varied and so different. And that being in the melting pot that we're in, we do better just by the nature of the conversation that we're having here, by having this exchange, by understanding that even in this country, others are able to celebrate their heritage freely, celebrate their traditions freely. But are you really doing it freely when it has to be so exclusive? You're not really, we have our own groups. It's just like our neighborhoods now. You have predominantly white neighborhoods, predominantly Black neighborhoods, predominantly Muslim and Hispanic, and in between. We are the most segregated. We're still segregated. And so are we really free culturally when we can only express ourselves comfortably in our own, among our own people? Or are we really free when we can express ourselves culturally without, and also taking into consideration the historical experiences of those of us who did not choose to come here? We were forced to come here, and there's a history of that. So our experiences are different, and so that where we can respect one coming from another country who may have been just as likely oppressed in their country and come here and experience that freedom, but to be pulled into a situation for those of us who have the Black experience and who know of our history and our culture, and others. We're not the only ones, but I can speak to my experience and what the conversations I have in my household and with my Black children and my Black son. It's a lot different to be here where it's good to hear that others get to celebrate who they are while there are still those of us trying to fight for who we are.
That was a lot. Yeah.
That's a
Dan,
lot.
I haven't heard from you. Go on.
Hey, Dan here. So just giving some context for a little bit about my background. I'm actually an adoptee from the Philippines. I was raised in a predominantly white community, like 90-some%. So listening to the different comments and the different viewpoints is very enlightening. And there was a couple things that I literally was trying to like grab the thoughts. So that way it's just like, don't leave, I need it.
Mine left.
I should have like taken notes, but like I've had these conversations countless times now. Linda knows, she's seen me like have these discussions. Couple things that came to my mind that really stuck out the most to me of things to kind of keeping in mind when we have these kind of conversations. The first thing was someone mentioned about like understanding our history. And I think that is probably one of the really good jump off points to really grasp about what's going on right now. And before I jump into like my response and analogy, kind of thinking about this, I kind of live by this belief. This idea, I might have heard it from the past. I would love to give them credit, but it's just something I live by. So I basically tell people, if I give you a novel that you've never heard of before, and I ask you to open it up to the very middle and read me like 2 sentences, would you be able to summarize the entire book? I would hope not. The reason why is because you need to read chapter 1, 2, 3. Every sentence, every letter, every part matters because it gives the context to the entire story. The way our country has been formed was very systemic. So what that means is that, like we were talking about earlier, about like how history has been very skewed. It's very one-sided. It's not the full story. Because of that, a lot of these issues that we see today are shadows from those previous chapters. Right now, we're in the middle of a story, but in order for us to move forward, we have to also look back. There's a Filipino proverb, and I'm going to totally butcher this, but it basically goes, ang hindi marunong luminong sa pinangganinan ay hindi makararating sa paroroonan. And it basically means he who does not look back to his roots will not reach his destination. And it's very easy for a lot of communities I've talked to before, even on my own Facebook, where they're like, well, why can't we all get along? Why can't we just live in peace? Why can't we do? The bottom line, and this is probably my biggest thing that I will shout to the top of a mountain, we have to understand that your lived experience in America is a different experience than my America. We think that the life as an American is a standard. And I'm just going to tiny diverge just a little bit. the phrase that I've heard a lot, especially during this pandemic and after pandemic, is things will go back to normal. There never was a normal, there will never be a normal. That's just the reality of it. Everyone got impacted by the pandemic in multiple different ways. We don't know. More scars are unseen.
Mhm.
More scars are unseen. So with that in mind, understanding our experiences, when we come into, as like you were mentioning earlier about that cultural humility, I admire that. It's that idea of, this is my experience, this is your experience. How do we stand in solidarity and systemically change a lot of these things that have happened? Like we were talking about earlier, why we are more segregated now than we were in 1960, according to multiple different studies. Well, a lot of it was because of the redlining of districts. That was a systemic practice that banks did. The housing mark, I forgot the exact government org, but they didn't allow Black and brown people to take out mortgage loans. And they literally drew red lines around districts they saw was a bad investment. So areas that did not get those mortgage loans did not get the property taxes, which did not fund the schools. And over time, that's why we start seeing these drastic cuts, like on Jefferson, where you go from Detroit to Grosse Pointe, and it's like, whoa, there are mansions. That's the result of redlining of districts. There's even a physical proof in Detroit of the wall. The wall is still up. And that wall was literally designed to blockade the area, saying people who are south, this was a bad investment. Those who are north of it, good investment. That's why we're more segregated now. But that's also segregated our mentalities. A lot of our communities are so diverse here in the state. And a little side note, I work for the Chaldean Community Foundation. They're in Sterling Heights. They do a lot of work with refugees and immigrants, incredible work. But one of the things that the Briarwood Wall, we realized that we are a very diverse state, but we are significantly segregated. There are communities that are like, I don't know who a Chaldean is, and they have to explain it. I don't know who a Hmong is. We have to explain it. So, but we crisscross all the time in the grocery stores. So when we think of segregation, we have conversations with people. They're like, oh, well, I can walk at the same thing. I can do, yeah, great. You can walk in the same grocery store, but do you know who that neighbor is? No, I know nothing about him. Well, there you go. The other thing that comes to mind is something that I've slowly started to reject over time. And it was actually sparked by my race and communications professor at Oakland U. She challenged us on like day one to really question the concept of the American melting pot. She basically said, if you think of a melting pot, what happens when things melt? It becomes part of the whole. It's no longer part of that piece. Now, people could argue, well, it's still in there somewhere. Yes, but it's kind of become a little bit more of a cheese fondue. Like it's not there anymore. And sadly, when we pass it on to our children, a lot of kids and people my age, we don't speak our parents' language. We definitely don't speak our grandparents' language. And that culture will slowly die off. That's why I admire organizations that are keeping up these cultures and heritages. But I think the key thing is understanding why that matters. Why is that important to keep it? Because what it boils down to is questioning what even is an American. Up in Canada, they have in their constitution the mosaic. I love the concept of the mosaic, is that every part matters, every part is individual, but when you step back, it becomes the bigger picture. They still hold on to their culture, their identities, but it's not this idea of everything gets mushed into this big melting concept. Now, that's just, again, my personal opinion. But even a way to even think about it is, what is even American food? Now, I know it sounds like I'm totally diverging here, but we had this conversation over the weekend with a couple of friends of mine where we were talking about the history of Chinese food in America. Things like chop suey was made in America by Chinese Americans. But oftentimes we put the foreigner label on it. When we say American food, we think of burger, fries. But we don't include Chinese food, soul food, all these different other things that are unique to the US. So I guess what I'm getting down to the boiling point is not boiling point, but the bottom line is basically, I feel that we're in that crossroads right now where we're trying to figure out exactly who are we? And then how do we help out other communities not of our own without overstepping our boundaries, without assuming of another person's experience? Even two people within the same ethnicity are going to have lived experience. I actually got to witness that last week, and it was a very hot debate. But two people from the same community have drastically different views about their own communities. So I think that's where we're kind of at, if that was if hopefully you're all kind of able to follow that,
Absolutely.
like my brain does this, but it,
Yeah.
I think that's where we're kind of at right now, is we are still trying to figure out exactly who is American. We say freedom, justice, liberty. And then because of our history, America has been set on this pedestal, this really high standard to the rest of the world. And the definition of anxiety, and again, this is another quote, but the definition of anxiety is understanding the abundance of freedom that we have. Once we understand how much freedom we have, that's where anxiety comes into play. It's like overwhelming. And that's, I think that kind of is like my perspective. And I love hearing everyone's perspectives here today. But I wanted to interject that kind of viewpoint, because for me as an adoptee, one of the experience I grew up with is people are like, you look like a foreigner. Do you speak Filipino? Da, 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 da. Even when I'm in Filipino circles, they're like, what kind of Filipino are you? As a joke, but they're like, you don't know this and this and this and this. I'm like, no, I grew out in the cornfields. Mm-hmm. And then when I go into white circles, they're like, you speak really good English. Are you foreign? Are you from this? I'm like, I live down the street. Mm-hmm. So the idea ends up becoming that orphaning. And I think at the end of the day, everyone wants to belong to something. And now we're at a crossroads where we're trying to figure out what exactly is that communal base. And I think that's something that everyone, everywhere, is desperately trying to understand at our purest of essence and our purest of core. So
then just before you mentioned melting pot, I see in the comment section on Facebook, Tara Mitchner said, I think true diversity looks more like a salad than a melting pot. So they were already on the same page with you before you spoke. So very good. Someone else was about to say something.
I was just going to say, Gail, I think we know what an American is. Mm-hmm. An American is someone who lives here or was born here. To be an American is basically, it's a thing of proximity. We're all American. I think, though, that there are forces within America who don't think that certain people who live in America, who have gained American citizenship, are real Americans. I think there are forces that fight against accepting people who were born here or people who have gained citizenship here.
That makes me want to ask a question. Whose country is this? And why is it such a challenge for the country ownership to conform, unite, and rally for what so many people from different ethnic groups fight for and request and expect as Americans? Whose country is this?
Yeah, I would say that, Gail, I would say that this is a land of immigrants. Not many people, sometimes it's very surprising, to me that, not many people know that this is a land of immigrants, because my boss always says that, you know what, Raju, I'm happy that my great-great-grandfather stuck into this country 400 years ago. That way I don't have to fight for visa. I don't have to fight for, citizenship. I don't have to fight for a green card. But some people are not completely aware that this country is formed out of immigrants. This country is developed out of a sweat of every immigrant who come up with a dream to live in this country. So I would say that this country belongs to immigrants, and this belongs to everyone to enjoy the freedom and liberty and all sorts of great things.
There was a meme, I want to piggyback off of that real quick. There was a meme before I forget it that I read that I really admire. And it said, if you are an American, you are, and I think they were meaning like your ancestry or however they worded it, but you're either an immigrant, a refugee, Native American, or a slave. That's it. And I think that's something that immediately came to mind when you mentioned that we're a country of immigrants, is that these are really the only, I don't want to say the categories, but these are really the only four descendants that you can really pick from. And I think it is very important to understand that, like you said, like we come from different countries, but for a lot of people, it wasn't by choice. Like a lot of the refugees that we work with, they had to flee from war to live, to exist. Native Americans, I could go on forever about that. This is their home. In fact, a friend of mine who is Native Hawaiian said probably one of those beautiful things. She said, this is your country. This is your land. Teach me how to walk on your land. So it's a combination of with history and the influences and understanding that it's not quite so black and white, but it is a complex structure that we are constantly living in. So I just wanted to like piggyback off in that one. So
No problem. And time is really rolling fast, and I want to make sure I get to this part of it because this was a question we talked about. No easy segue. I want to know, how do you talk about racism at home? We're suggesting, without necessarily saying the word racism, the reason behind a lot of the things are not happening. I want to know ethically, how do you talk about racism at the
Yeah,
do you talk about it
Gail.
at the dinner table, wherever you talk about it?
Yeah, Gail, again, this is Raju. I think I can start it and
Sure.
I'll let others chime in.
Absolutely.
It can be very hard to talk to your children about racism. Some parents worry about exposing their children to issues like racism and discrimination at an early stage. Others shy away from talking about something they themselves might not fully understand or don't feel comfortable discussing. But I always think that you should involve your kids in a conversation, but it got to be age appropriate. You know, I have done a lot of research. As I mentioned before, I have very young kids, and one daughter at 7 years. I recently had a conversation with her regarding these issues because she's very smart and internet is at the disposal, so she get to know so much information than other people. So I always think that age appropriate conversation is very important. For example, under 5 years, at this age, children may begin to notice and point out differences in people they see around them. As a parent, I think you have the opportunity to gently lay the foundation of their worldview, use language that's age appropriate and easy for them to understand. For example, the number one, recognize and celebrate differences. If your child asks about someone's skin color, you can use it as an opportunity to acknowledge that people do indeed look different, but do point out that things we have in common. You could say, we are all human, but we are all unique. Isn't that amazing? Number two, be open. Make it clear that you're always open to your children's questions and encourage them to come to you with them. Avoid shushing them, or they will start to believe that's a taboo topic and they will just avoid from it. Number three, use fairness. Children, especially those around 5, tend to understand the concept of fairness quite well. Talk about racism is as unfair and unacceptable, and that's why we need to work together to make it better. As I said, there are other ways, and based on the age appropriate, you have to lay the conversation, but it is very important to talk to the kids that racism is totally unfair and unacceptable.
I, Raju, thank you so much. I really appreciated what you said. I agree with you. And because I think about my experience in my home, it really wasn't talked about. I didn't start to really understand until my experiences outside of my home and also in my friends' homes, the way that their parents were. My mother wasn't, a lot of times don't talk about it. It was denial. In my friend's home, I saw fear from parents saying, scared for their sons, scared for, as I was growing up. So I'm saying from not as a small child, but as teenagers, as we started driving, as we started going out. So where my mother was more or less, keep it, just don't talk about it. I don't know what you're talking about. Other families that in my neighborhood where my friends were growing up, there was some real sincere fear in probably their mothers. And it came out sometimes as anger. And I just want to point out, there's a book by Heather McGee, and she talks about if we deny it, and this is for me as in growth, denial leaves people ill prepared to really function and thrive in a diverse community. So it's really important that we do talk about it. It is uncomfortable, but it lends us to less effective collaboration as a diverse group. So we can see, if we see our reasons why we should be more working together than not, that makes us stronger in our neighborhoods. As Dan said, as we go into our grocery stores, we know our neighbors, because I think we have that opportunity now to do that.
If I may jump in here, Gate, if I understand your question, is it also about, does racism exist in other cultures? Or have we experienced racism when we were growing up? And if that is a question, I would say certainly yes. I think many of you are familiar with, in India at least, we have what they call this quote unquote, the caste system. The caste system was a form of racism, actually, where people were segregated based on, say, their education or based on their wealth, based on, well, I would say education, wealth, and status. Many of these things kind of separated people from different, mostly education part of it, which separated out. And pretty much that is something that sort of, influenced a lot of the thinking, even as children when we were growing up, as to, who would come to your house to clean. The cleaning people were considered as a different caste. And the people who actually, went to school and for higher education was a different caste. The people who took care of, the financial part of it, that was a different. So when it started off originally way back when, probably about maybe 5,000 years ago or something, it started out more as something where communities were divided based on what value they brought to the whole community itself. But over a period of time, it morphed into something which was very ugly, which was this quote unquote caste system. So racism is something that, individually, I think in different cultures, we have seen that happen. And sometimes that sort of influences people's thinking. And with that, for example, when we come to a different country like America, where there's much more openness, it is not about the fact that, okay, now there is openness, but psychologically that thinking is brought into a very different way in how you look at things. So that is just a different perspective that I wanted to bring into this equation about racism in general. As much as we talk about equality, openness, and oneness, if that is fundamentally not adhered to as a value, I don't think will ever change. And that is, even in India, we have the fundamental values of truth and non-violence. And, the other one is, we call this brahmacharya or self-control, which is, trying to be away from all the material things kind of thing. Those are the fundamental values, but many times we forget those fundamental values. We look into a lot of these kind of things. And then when we come in here, that doesn't change. So just something to keep in mind as
Thank you,
racism in
Sunita.
communities.
I know one thing I'd like to hear, because when I think of racism and the conversations that come in many African-American homes, it isn't in general. We don't speak of it in general. And I was wondering about that with other races. I mean, Black people have to get down and talk about what's gonna happen to you because of the color of your skin that's racist, that's discriminate, that you have to be ready to know how to respond. It is directly talking to your children about what may happen to them versus, we're all different colors, we should all love one another, he's Black, he's white, he's, I think often many young people already know that. Maybe I'm presuming, but they know that they're different races and they know that but they may not know the challenges that they're going to experience. And we have to prepare them early. So I kind of want to talk on that. How do we talk to them about what they're likely to face because of their race?
I think, Gail, you're exactly right. Racism does exist. I don't think you can decouple racism from whiteness. Racism is the dirty air that we breathe every day. In my household, I just don't have the luxury to wait to tell my 3 boys, wait till it's age appropriate. Tamir Rice was killed at 11 for playing with a toy gun in a park. I don't have the luxury to hem and haw about it. It's gotta be, it's a straight, truthful conversation. It's a hard conversation. it's a must-have conversation. I'm trying to give I don't even have the words. The conversation is integral to how we live, if we will live. It's in everything that we do. It's in the church we go to. It's in the schools we go to. It's in the job I get or don't get, or my kids get or don't get, or my wife. It's in the sports that my kids play. It's in whether they get on the team or not on the team. It's in everything. It's all encompassing. And it is not for the faint of heart, as far as I'm concerned. It is life or death. And I just don't feel like a lot of us in this cultural milieu that we live in, I just don't feel like people give it the weight that it deserves. I just don't see it. We talk about it in these lofty terms all the time, but for Black people, it's not lofty. It is in your face. It's everywhere. It's everything.
Bruce, do you think that is because if a person doesn't experience it themselves, like for instance, as I said, maybe being of a different nationality, even a different color, may not experience, like you said, the concern or the fear for their child being stopped by the police, or being stopped at a mall for wearing a hoodie, or because they're running down the street. So if there's a lack of understanding of what that means, a life or death situation may not be a life and death situation for someone else. Does that?
Yes, I think so. Two things. I think you're right. Some people don't experience the weight that I experience. So I'm not sure if they could really, be able to explain it or to even empathize with it. I don't know. I think first of all, I think it requires an empathy. And I don't know if people have that empathy or care to have that empathy. Yes, it is life or death. And I don't want to, yes, it's life or death. But it's also, like I said, it's whether or not my middle son, who happens to be darker than his other two brothers, gets on a sports team. We've had experiences in Novi where coaches have, we felt, done things that were based on that's the other thing. It's hard to even call it racial, but I feel like it's involved, and it's very hard to explain that to your 14-year-old, to your 15-year-old.
What do you say to someone or groups that say it isn't racism? It isn't in our city. It isn't in our city. That isn't it at all.
Answer that question. I would love to answer that question.
Yes, please.
And this is going to piggyback off a little bit of what Bruce said as well, is that, there are a lot, we have a lot of freedoms and luxuries in this country, and being ignorant is not one of them. To say that, oh, we just didn't know, or
type that in the chat,
understand, or even that, oh, we didn't know any of this. We don't have a luxury for that now. Again, I mean, many of our cultures, and I would describe this to all of our cultures. I grew up in a family of course, where education was important and still is important. I don't think that's just attributed to Indian culture, Asian culture, although we may see, we just got our first Black Scripps winner in years, right? Everybody on this panel knows exactly that we were all like shocked. The Black community is ecstatic. But I'm saying that there are things that we are very much aware of, but I think Raju talked about it. There is this discomfort in talking about the uncomfortable. And so even though there's been a lot of change in this culture, we've seen change in many. People say, well, we had a Black president, what more do Black people want? We've had change, but the remnants of what has come before that still exist. And so when we're talking about racism or what we know and don't know, we don't have the luxury, at least Black people don't, but I think none of us, if we want to be this salad that someone else mentioned, and instead of this melting pot, if we want to be a country united and where we respect everyone's culture. I happen to be in a profession where I have the privilege of hearing about all kinds of culture, and although I had a class, those experiences with my clients are the best teachers for me. And also having Black children, a son and 2 daughters, those are great teachers for me, because their experience that they're having, it's not the experience that I had. But I will say that when we were not understanding what racism is or what discrimination is, we Google everything, right? Our kids, and no affront to you, Raju, with the age appropriateness, and I've counseled kids as well. We put a laptop or a tablet in their hands at 2. So some might argue, is that age appropriate? I don't know, but I would say that to say that we're just not all the same, but we are the same because we're all human. I think we are allowing ourselves to be to stay comfortable by not addressing what we all know is of issue. And so you may not understand all of the issues and the nuances of it, but there's nothing that precludes us from picking up a book, having a conversation. Raju, or any of you who have groups that you have, a cultural group, invite some people in. Mix those groups, get with some other cultures and find out, hey, what's your experience? We want to understand this. So to remain ignorant is a choice. And I'm not using ignorant in an ugly way. I'm just saying it's a choice. And also, and lastly, I'll say that, some of our children know more than we know, and we're grown. Most of us here on this panel, I'm sure some are younger than others. I'm middle of the road, but we're afraid to have these conversations because we don't have the answers and we haven't done our research and we don't study. So we couch the conversation in something that's comfortable for us, but it is not necessarily helpful, because our children, depending on where you live, or even when they get ready to go to college, you may have them in the bubble now, but if they go to college, they're coming out of it. I'm living that right now with my 2 college-age children and my oldest daughter in grad school. There is no bubble. There's no bubble. It may feel safe, but it's not. We have to be real about what has happened in this country, what is happening in this country. And if we want to have real cultural conversations, we have to really bring truth to power and talk about all of our experiences. There are some things, and I don't want to be too long-winded, but there's some things that I even admire in the Indian culture, like the cultural, what's the word? Just the respect for teachers. I think someone mentioned that. I didn't get really experience with that until I went to Vietnam and Thailand and just saw how much teachers are revered. Our children would be so much better. Our education system would be so much better if we understood, how do you value these teachers? How did you get your children to that? Or how did your culture come to that understanding? See, that's a conversation we could have. But we can't have it also without talking about the experience of these children who maybe have that disregard for their teachers, maybe because they're not respected in the classroom because it's an all Black school, but all the teachers are white. You see what I'm saying? So there are some things here we could really talk about, but we can't, fluff it off. We can't act like, these are, we don't understand these things. And no, we just all get along. If you treat people right, that is not true any more than telling a child you can be anything you want to be in life. That is not always true. They can be a lot of things, but being anything, not necessarily so. We have to be truthful about it all.
Kristen, I want to add on to what you're saying when you talk about because I've been in Japan, Thailand, and there is a reverence for
yes.
But I also want you to recognize that many of these cultures are very homogeneous.
And
so what has happened here in America is that, now I'm going to date myself here when I say that when I opened up a book, it was see Jane, see Dick, see Flip, see Susan. I mean, they got a little frisky there because they had a little sister, down the road. But I'm bringing this all up because one of the things that we all can do is that we're trying to pass bills, for instance, so that we have culturally appropriate information that speaks the truth. Again, talking about what Roger said, books for beginners to middle age to up into high school, into college, right? So most of us didn't hear anything about Black history, Asian history, Indian or Native American history until we got into college. We all knew about Pearl Harbor. We all may have heard about George Washington Carver. We all heard about certain things, right? But nobody ever said that it feels bad to be here for a length of time and then to always be the person on the bottom of the rung, because everybody else, whoever may be climbing up, doesn't want to be on the bottom of the rung. So do they assimilate so that they can be just one step ahead or two steps ahead? These are conversations that are really, really difficult. And so what we can do is we can ask that our schools reflect us, all of us, Muslim, Buddhist, if we're going to talk about cultures, the Asian culture. And again, when we say Asian, we may be talking a whole bunch of hundreds of different people with different cultures and different backgrounds. Southeast Asians, West Asians, African Americans. You can be from the islands. You can be from Africa. You can be from, so we need to stop looking at us as just us, but expand into really that there are so many different cultures, even in cultures that we think, because I've been so fascinated by my friends who say, a dear friend of mine said this to me, you say Black Americans, but what do you mean? Are they from Africa? Are they from Jamaica? Are they from Bahamas? Are they from Haiti? Because they are African. Are they African American? I think that's something that if we were in school and they started to teach that there are these so many different groups of people. We say Asians, do they mean Chinese, Japanese, Indian? Do they mean Taiwanese? Do they mean Okinawans? Filipino? We can respect each other's cultures, but if we never learned anything about each other, and we get into being teenagers and we see one or two or three, like I said, I grew up in Detroit, so I'm a very Midwestern person. In California, you're probably going to see more people like me than you're going to see here, especially 60 years ago. So my point is that we have an opportunity to start making our government responsible for doing the right thing. One of them is, let's look at, can we change our books to reflect the truth?
Yeah, Linda.
Everybody here is talking about the truth. Let's reflect our truth in a better way than just, because this is great dialogue, but what do we do to make those changes, right?
And Linda, that's always, I ask that question every time I have one of these conversations. What do we do to make the changes? One thing that I've heard, I hear it often from every ethnic group except for African Americans is get your education and then just blend in. I've heard that a lot, and I want to hear some comment to that. Is education the answer to equality and justice for all? And if not, tell me why.
Yeah,
Tell
I
them
can.
why. I already know why.
Yeah, I can go first. Probably education is the first, but what kind of education? As Linda alluded to, our public school systems especially has so much outdated syllabus, or maybe I should say curriculum, that doesn't talk about the fact-checked cultures. For example, I was told by my friend's daughter that in her social studies books, the information presented in the books are not fact-checked. For example, Indian Americans were portrayed are with caste system, poverty, worship of cows, and vegetarian. Is it fact checked? Because those young minds imprint that information in their minds, and they just stereotype whenever they see Indian Americans as only computer engineering or doctors, vegetarian, and who do yoga. But is it true? So this is a high time we all have to work with the school boards to change the curriculum to include the exact fact-checked information about so many cultures we have: Indian Americans, Asian Americans, Chinese Americans, and African American, because those school books are not actually represented the cultures and heritage we have. So I think that is very important for all of us to stand up and work closely with the school boards to change their curriculum as soon as possible, because we are not developing the world that we should with the worldview that students should have.
What about the blending in part? Just blend in and you'll be okay.
So first of all, the blending, I don't think that that's absolute truth, because you can't blend when somebody doesn't want you here. So you can't blend when there are obstacles that have been purposely put in place to keep you from blending in. So I don't know if blending is as much of a, how about we are working together for the same goals, and that given the same opportunities to have, I guess people have said equal opportunity, and then I'm going to shut up because really I'm going to let Bruce talk, because I just saw him.
Come on, Bruce.
Put you on the spot, Bruce.
No, give it to them, Bruce.
Well, no, I don't think education is the thing that levels all playing fields. I don't. I have a bachelor's in microbiology from Howard University. My oldest is at Howard. He's going to be an architect. I'm pushing my kids to go to have. That's why we moved to Novi, so we could be a part of this great school system. But we've been challenged by other things. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to deal with racism. Racism doesn't cower to higher education. It's not that. Racism is a power construct. It's a way to oppress people.
Do you think that, I'm sorry, I was going to say, so many people just have implicit biases that they don't even recognize that they have. There are a lot of people who will tell you, I'm not prejudiced, I'm not a racist, but in their head, they really believe what they believe. So I think that, who said that ignorance, so not to say that they're ignorant, but there's this ignorance out there that they really don't understand, right? Because they choose not to, because people can select what they can believe. If I'm hearing from you, and then I hear something from someone else, and then I hear something from the White House that has a whole different meaning, I can select what I, and it becomes self-fulfilling prophecy for them as well. Yeah. So that for me is what I see as a problem, because like you said, you can get the education, but if the person is trying to make a decision on who's going to get a job and Sally looks more, everybody being equal, Sally will probably get the job more
How
than.
about how about Black people? I read a New York Times article that said Black people with ethnic names are
I've heard
less likely to even be considered for jobs. This is in 2020. Like
Yeah.
the racism is deep. It's not on the surface. It's, like I said, it's in everything. It's almost like I can feel it in the air. It's everywhere. And I just don't want to. I'm 50. And I just don't want to continue the charade anymore. I've had I can't tell my kids in good faith, you need to just listen to the cops and get home, or because they could be killed just because they don't have to have done anything wrong.
Bruce, I want to tell you that I hear what you're saying. It's palpable just to me, just listening to you. But I want you to know too that everybody on this panel, and I'm speaking, I guess, for myself, that we feel it. We have our little tiny experiences have been nothing like yours. I'm sure, I'm not a Black man, so my experience is going to be different than yours, but I do have empathy. The young lady who was talking about, she has 2 daughters and they're growing up in this society. We get it. And I think, as Gail said, what do we do today to help move it along? We, as instrumentally, each one of us will try to do what we can. We speak out. I know.
I want people to have a chance to answer that, Linda. I like that. What do people do to help move it along? Because I know, okay, Dan, I'm gonna come right to you. I do know a number of people that they just don't get it. No matter how many talks we have, sessions we have, whatever it is, rallies, marches, are they in good heart? You can't speak to someone's heart, but why don't they get it? Why don't they just believe that if people of different ethnic groups say racism exists and needs to be addressed, why do they still deny it?
Yeah, I strongly think that that's because of the racial stereotyping. We develop our racial stereotype in a variety of ways. Probably on a very simple level, it's a human nature to categorize people. From an early age, we learn to place people and objects into categories. However, when we are very young, we tend to put less on an emphasis on attributing values to these categories.
Mm-hmm.
As we grow older and are influenced by parents, peers, and the media, our tendency to label different racial groups as superior, good, or inferior, or bad increases significantly.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, the less contact we have with a particular racial group, the more likely we are to have negative feelings about the group. Remember, I said, I'm not a vegetarian, I don't do yoga, I don't do computer engineer. From some American friend's perspective, I'm not an Indian American, I'm an outlier.
Mm-hmm.
I can give an example. I work in an engineering, I used to work in an engineering company, and I was in the elevator and I didn't press the floor number, but then a lady looked at me and said, "You going to 3rd floor?" I did not understand why she assumed I work in the 3rd floor. I said 4th floor and moved on.
Mm-hmm.
Same incident happens few different times in the elevator. And that is when I understood that they stereotype me, thinking I'm brown-skinned person, Indian American looking, so I must be working with computers and in IT group.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I'm an electrical engineer. These racial stereotypes can also foster feelings of hate and aggression that might lead to a false sense of entitlement and superiority. So I think we should go away from that racial stereotyping, because racial stereotyping is not certainly helping fighting this racial injustice.
Thank you, Rudder. Dan, I want to get to you, and then Jason has his hand up. I want to get to him as well. Dan?
Absolutely. So bouncing off of like what Bruce was saying, I love that passion. I love that energy that you've been giving here, and everyone on this panel as well. And there was a quote that was going through my mind over and over and over throughout this entire conversation. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but it basically says it takes for a very complex systematic system to exist, it takes a complex system to undo it. So when we were going back to the idea about, is it education? Is it this? Is it this? It's all of it simultaneously. And that is what makes it such a difficult conversation. One of the things for me personally that I've been working really hard on, and I'm just going to kind of plug it in here a little bit just to kind of give some idea. I'm actually working on making a grassroots TV show here in Michigan. There's a team of us of about 40 of us from a diverse range of backgrounds. All of us have hands at the screenplay. All of us have hands at the casting, everything. We're making sure that people are represented on screen and in the production team. And it's a fictional show that takes place in the midst of the 2020 pandemic. And it's focusing on a biracial family who owns a bubble tea shop in the suburbs, but they're from the city of Detroit. And all the characters that we have on here are BIPOC and marginalized people front and center, both in the production and on the screen. So it takes media, it takes TV, it takes film, it takes art, take education, policies, criminal justice. It takes every single thing in order to undo this complex system. I definitely agree with you, Roger, that a lot of it is stereotyping, but it's also the complexity that surrounds it, even within our own community. So just a tiny bit of a backstory with me, because of where I grew up, I will openly admit I was very ignorant to a lot of things. And when I started dating my partner, who is Black, putting that in context, I actually witnessed them getting pulled over. And that was actually very traumatizing, because up to that point, I was studying and seeing like all this stuff that was happening. Black Lives Matter was definitely starting to take off in 2014. It was definitely like, I'm all for this and everything. But there's no words to describe what that felt like. And I know it was predominantly about my partner, but that idea that my partner could have been killed. Mm-hmm. My partner could have been killed right in front of me. And that is something that is the cognitive dissonance that's in this country is so deeply embedded, even within our own circles and our own communities. This system that was developed, and I'll be very blunt about it, by colonization, has been baked into every single culture and every facet on this planet. And in order to undo this, it's going to take so many generations, even those after us. But I feel that with technology, it's helping to somewhat speed it up, but it's also causing a lot of conflictions. One person can go over here and say, is this factual? Because the argument I've seen before is just, oh, here, just go online and look it up. If they don't live it themselves, how are they going to know? Like, how are they going to empathize with a community that's not of their own? My partner and I are Black and I'm Asian, but we're also in the LGBT community. That's an intersectional identity that we have to live with. We don't have the luxury of not being part of Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate and LGBT rights simultaneously. We don't have that luxury. So that is something that is a very difficult thing for a lot of people to swallow, to understand that it's like, again, going back to my very first comment, is that your lived experience in America is going to be different than my lived experience in America. A lot of times we try to look at things as simplifying it, like racism good, racism bad. But it's not that simple. Like Bruce, you were mentioning earlier, Black sounding names have a less likely chance of getting a callback on a resume. And there's been countless studies showing that two resumes that are exactly identical, the one that does not have a Black sounding name does not get the callback. In Canada, and I'm going to call it out because the study kind of continued onto that, Asian sounding names, if they sound Chinese, if they sound Japanese, they're less likely to get a callback. So as we've said, it's difficult to kind of look at things as simply a thing good or thing bad. It is a complex structural system that has been baked into every one of us, and very much myself included. I've been feeling more confident lately to come out and say, these are some of the things that I once believed. These were some of the stereotypes that I wholeheartedly believed in growing up. Because since there was no one of that community around me, I didn't really take the time to really like invest into understanding. It became just, oh, it's just the way of life. Oh, that's just how things are. Oh, they're just getting bullied. Oh, there's just, but like someone was saying earlier, ignorance.
And I'm going to have to stop you 1 second because I have two hands up now, but thank you. I appreciate your comment there. I want to get to Jason.
I'm sorry. I just want to say one last thing and then I will hush throughout.
Okay.
I will forget what he said,
All right,
but
Jason's been waiting. I want to hear
I'm
you.
sorry. I just
That's
wanted
okay.
to, because Dan said it. And we're talking all around this issue about what's going to change things. And I'm going to, he said the word already. If we want to teach something and we want to see change, empathy. If we could learn to have empathy for each other in this country, that goes a long way than trying, not that we shouldn't change books, and I'm all for that, but it's not going to start until we can have that kind of respect and accommodation for each other, to understand what it is like for me to be in everyone's shoes on this screen, even the people we can't see, because we're all going to have our different experiences. And it's not good for me to assume that someone else, because they're of a different ethnicity, that they don't have challenges as well, because we all do on some level. But if we could learn to empathize, if you can't teach your children about racism because you don't understand, or discrimination, start with empathy. And then let's work our way back from there. But I want to say that because he hit that in that disjunctive. I am done.
Thank you, Kristen. Jason, now you've been waiting patiently. I'm going to hear from you, please. You can open your camera if you'd like.
Sorry, I'm having trouble getting my camera to work, so I'll just have to speak for sake of time.
Okay.
But first, Bruce, Dan, Kristen, Linda, absolutely, I agree with your sentiment 100%. And I wanted to get your opinion on. I've started to come to the realization, being a white male, that the people that are apt to listen will and have, and I feel like it takes just as much effort to remain ignorant as it does to gain empathy and understanding. I feel like it's an act either way. You can't passively just remain ignorant or passively be supportive or empathetic. I feel like you got to act. So to that point, I feel, and I've seen where we were in 2020 from a place of everybody moving towards activism and doing something to affect positive change, to now more empathy, more an apathetic standpoint, especially from those in my community, the white community. And I've also seen, even worse, a backlash of trying to resist, push back, and basically delay, defer, and deny change in this country. And I'm wondering, I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. And maybe I'll put out a call. Anybody who's listening to this, I'm so happy you're here and listening, but we need you to do something. Listening and spectating is not enough. It's a start. But if you, after this, consider yourself the race has started and the gun's fired, we need you to act. And I was wondering if there's any other calls to action that any of you on the panel from different perspectives might be able to give, that could also keep our society as a whole moving in that positive direction and not lose the moment. And just have this be another moment in history where something changed for a little bit and then went back to the ways it was. But maybe this time, finally, it could have been a sustained push that eventually gets us to the America that we all want to be a part of.
Jason, I needed you to comment 45 minutes ago. That was wonderful. Because we are at 8 o'clock, but we started at, I think, 6:33. So we're going to go a little bit longer. I don't even know if we have a chance to have that responded to, but please let that absorb and soak into your brain for a part 2. I always surprise you and let you know we're going to have a part 2. So we will. I'll let you know the date. But I see another hand up and I don't want to neglect that. It's Kumara. I'm trying to read what you have, but please unmute yourself. You can open your camera if you like, and please tell me your name.
I'm not able to open the camera.
Okay, that's fine. I can hear you.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity. I always used to wonder where is the root cause for racism. I heard Bruce talk about how it's intent to oppress. And I also
We lost
the presentation. Hello?
I lost you for a second, but continue, please.
Yeah, so fundamentally, I'm not sure if your people are intentionally racist or because I strongly believe about this unconscious bias. And when we grow up, we are creatures of patterns, right? We want to be right. We want to do the right thing. And when we come in without knowing what is right or wrong, we learn from what we are told is right. So we don't have experience to go through individually and learn what is right or wrong by experience. So when we are told, a lot of times I think the bias is sown in, we grow up with the wrong bias. But then it takes a lot of openness to realize that I am blindsided or I am doing something wrong. Unless, if a lot of people say, just like you have to be empathy, we have to learn to be open as well. That, hey, my belief system may not be always the right one. Can I, am I doing something unconsciously wrong? That level of thing we have to learn to introspect ourselves. And we can be empathetic only if you're willing to be open. So that's something which sometimes we are having unconditional handicap. A case in point is that before I came to this country, there was a belief that, hey, moving in, beware of Black people approaching you because they are trying to mug you. It took me a lot of experience that I've met so many people, nobody mugged me. Why is this something which people are telling me this? Because that's what sometimes you're led to believe seeing the media story. So sometimes you develop patterns in your mind without knowing that you are unconsciously developing this racism, which is branded as racism, but you can't tell what is right from wrong. So we need some help. As it's a two-way street to learn and to teach. Sometimes if you are racist and you're unconsciously racist, it's two-way streets.
Thank you. Interesting comments both ways. We're at our time limit. We are done. Linda, I saw your hand. I know, but we could go on and on because I didn't even finish. I had at least 3 more good questions that I wanted to throw out there. But thank you, everyone. My panel, you all were excellent. Once again, I appreciate all of your comments and your expressions and enlightening more and more. We have to just keep at it until we start seeing results. I'm strong advocate that they're more for us than against us. I just got to believe it. We just have to pull it together and get these points across until action is seen, until people move in the right direction quicker. I'm one of action. I like it to happen yesterday. It hasn't happened yesterday. Are we moving in the right direction? I'm not sure. People can say yes or no, but we're going to keep talking, keep acting, and keep moving until the majority of us are happy. Wouldn't it just be nice if we had the majority happy? Because we're not. Thank you all. People tuning in on Facebook and on Zoom, I appreciate your time. This will remain on Facebook. So if you want to tell a friend or family, an enemy to look on and listen to the conversation and maybe get enlightened a little bit, maybe that will help. Follow our website for part 2 of this conversation. We will continue it virtual, but we'll also have things in person at the Novi Public Library. So watch out for that. Thank you, everyone, and have a good night.
Thanks for the opportunity, Gail.
Absolutely.